Hello everyone and welcome to the Everton show. There's a huge shadow across Goodison Park this week, and it's a shadow that isn't going away for a very long time. On this week's programme we're paying tribute to the legend that is Howard Kendall. Well, the passing of Howard Kendall still hasn't quite sunk in with everyone just yet, but we're going to hear some lovely tributes throughout the show in the company of my guest and someone who knew Howard Kendall very well, Graham Stewart. Graham, it's difficult to know where to begin. Where were you when you found out this devastating news?
Well, I was at Finch Farm Saturday morning. Our friends and sponsors from Chang were over and I was giving them a guided tour of Finch Farm and the wonderful facilities we have there, only to be interrupted halfway through it and told the devastating news, and to say it knocked the stuffing out of me and pretty much everybody at Finch Farm who was there at the time would be an understatement. Everybody
was just in a state of disbelief. It was as if you were expecting Howard to turn the corner or give you a shout at the game.
Yeah, that sums it up. Just pure disbelief. Very eerie situation, and you know the lads were there having their pre-match as well, and obviously Duncan is part of that first team squad and what have you, and I think when they saw the look on Duncan's face and how much it affected him, clearly it spread throughout the squad.
It was devastating news on a devastating day. Well, when Roberto Martinez first arrived at Everton Football Club from Wigan Athletic, one of the first things he sorted was an invite to Finch Farm for Howard Kendall. The current Blues boss holds the club's greatest ever manager in the highest regard, so it was a bitter blow when he found out the dreadful news on Saturday morning.
Well, you can imagine is a real shock in the manner that it happened, and then straight away, when you got 2 seconds to reflect, it's just a moment to celebrate. It shouldn't be a sad moment. Of course, the passing is a really sad moment, and for his family, and we all send our thoughts. But I think it's a day to celebrate. It's a day to look into a very inspirational figure, to have him as a guidance always. Any manager that comes to Everton needs to understand the role that Howard Kendall had, and then you look at that relationship with the crowd, with the club, being a footballer that he set real high standards, special memories, and then he brought that belief that anything could be achieved with Everton. And at that time, in the 80s, he put Everton in probably the highest step in European football. And for me, today has to be everyone who represents Everton. We have to be up to the level that he showed us, and it needs to be a real celebration, and just try to show Howard that it needs to be a special day for every Evertonian.
Well, all three of our official club ambassadors knew Howard Kendall very well, of course. All three played under the great man, and all three regarded him not just as the gaffer, but also a friend. This is Graham Sharp, not long after the tragic announcement had been made.
You know, really sad news. Saw Howard at the last game against Liverpool. You know, he was in good fettle as always, along with Lily, his wife. So devastating news this morning. Devastating.
You knew him well. What did you like most about him?
Howard was a fun guy, you know, he's a character, but as a manager, very good. I think his record speaks for itself. You know, the most successful time in Everton's history was when Howard was at the helm. Great manager to play for. He was just a great guy. You know, he believed in team spirit, and the lads enjoyed themselves, but he also made sure the lads worked extremely hard, and I think all the players had the utmost respect for him. And even in his second and third spells back, you know, okay, it didn't go as well as the first time, but I think everybody who played under him wouldn't have a bad word to say for him. Just spoke to Duncan before, who obviously was close to him as well, so it's going to be a hard afternoon today.
Well, more reflection now. David Unsworth is very much part and parcel of the Finch Farm footprint these days as the coach of the under-21s. He's been reflecting this week on the role that Howard Kendall played in making him a professional footballer all those years ago.
It's difficult to know where to start, really. He's the man who gave me my first professional contract, gave me my debut against Tottenham when I was still a scholar, when I was still an apprentice, and just nothing but great memories for the man, both as a man and as a manager and as a former player. Just devastated with the news that we heard over the weekend, and very difficult time for everybody connected with the club, both past and present. He's a great man, and everything that's been said over the last few days, I can only echo and just tell you again from somebody else just what a great man he was, and he'll be sorely lost.
How do you remember the time when you was integrated into the first team, when Howard was in charge, when he gave you your debut?
Just he had a great aura about him. His record spoke for itself. Obviously, I came in 1988 as a young 14-year-old, and then to be an apprentice in 1990. After all the success of the 80s, it was just a great time to be a young Everton player, and to then have, Howard as your manager, to believe in you the way he did with myself, and give me my first contract, and to give me my debut. It's just very, very sad.
Can you remember how he told you would be playing against Tottenham in that game?
Yeah, he told me on the bus on the way to the ground. He tapped me on the shoulder. There was myself, Ian Jenkins, who was starting the game, and Billy Kenny was, myself and Billy Kenny were on the bench in the days of 2 outfield players and a goalkeeper. So he told us on the bus on the way to the game, and in his unique way, he did that quite a lot, and it was great. And to then get on and make my debut as a young kid, it's what I dreamt of.
Everybody's clearly shocked by the news. Nobody really knows what to say, Graham. This was the scene at Goodison Park before the kick-off against Manchester United at the weekend. This was a lovely moment. But for me, when the referee's whistle came to start the game, nothing really mattered.
I know at times, we all love our football, and none more so than Howard himself, but sometimes you have to put everything in perspective, and life itself is more important than football at times, and that was one of those afternoons. I felt for the lads, to be honest with you. I felt for the crowd, because it's a catch-22 situation. You're looking for the players to give the crowd something to shout about. If it's not quite happening for the players, they're looking for the fans to give them a lift, and I don't think either set had it in them on Saturday.
No. We were in the streets around Goodison, you were in the lounges, we were in the stands. Nobody was up for the actual game, but everybody wanted to be at Goodison.
Yeah, everybody needed to be at Goodison, didn't they, and to pay their respects, and quite rightly so. But I think if we're all honest about it, I just wanted Saturday to finish and just go to sleep and wake up to a new day.
We've had messages of support, messages of condolence from all over the world of football, and that doesn't surprise you, does it?
Not at all. Worldwide, Howard was a renowned figure in the game, an absolute icon, one of the greatest managers in English history. There's no doubt about that. So, from Blackburn to Manchester City, Bilbao, over in Greece as well. So, worldwide, Howard, terrific man.
Doesn't get the credit he deserves, does he? Because, as you say, he was one of the legendary managers of the English game.
Well, he was. There's only really Sir Alex that springs to mind in the modern day game that I can think of in that same esteem as Howard. And Sharpie touched on it earlier in his interview. That spell he had in the 80s was memorable for all Evertonians.
And also, people forget that when we won the cup in 1995, Howard signed most of those players.
He did. Myself included. It's always a funny story. It always tickles me when we talk about it, because he said to me, "Yeah, you remember, lad, I signed you, but I sold you as well." And he used to giggle, and he had an infectious giggle about him as well. And we shared some funny times about that story.
Howard had this unique style. He could let you down with a smile, couldn't he?
No, he could. Another game I played against West Ham one day, and I was having an absolute shocker, and I managed to score the winner, and he was stood there at the tunnel at the end of the game, and he said to me, "I knew you'd come good, So we were arguing all the way down the tunnel, and I hated him at the top of the tunnel, and by the time I got to the dressing room, I loved him.
That was Howard Kendall all over. And you know what? We'll end the first part of this week's show by listening to Howard Kendall himself. Howard was the architect of the night that so many Evertonians recognise as Goodison Park's finest. I refer, of course, to the 24th of April 1985, when we beat Bayern Munich in the semi-final of the European Cup Winners' Cup.
We'd drawn 0-0 in Munich, and I felt that it was going to be difficult still at Goodison. They took the lead, they were winning 1-0 at half-time, and then it was a case of... I couldn't fault the players in the first half. I thought, keep it going, everything's going to be okay, and it was. And Trevor Stevens' third goal, I mean, it was absolutely magnificent. The atmosphere was incredible. Their coach was very, very upset at the way Andy Gray was playing up front. I wasn't. I think the cards would have been out now, you know, yellow and red or whatever. But no, we got away with that, and it was a fantastic night. I think anyone who was at the game, played in the game, on the bench in the game, the trainer's bench on the game, and the lucky supporters who actually were there will always remember that night.
What a lovely piece of film that is. It's a desperately sad time, isn't it, for all Evertonians. We'll have some more tributes to Howard Kendall after this short break. Welcome back to part 2 of the Everton show. We're celebrating the life of Howard Kendall on this week's programme. Howard played 277 times for his beloved Everton and then sat in the dugout as a manager for a further 542 games. That was over 3 spells, of course. But as always with the genuine legends, the stats don't tell the full story. Tony Hibbert was an academy prospect when Howard was in his 3rd stint as manager, and Hibbo explained why the great man's influence was so vast.
Yeah, massive. Obviously being around the club and obviously growing when I was a young lad. When he was in the 80s and stuff like that, and coming through and seeing the pictures and seeing people who have played underneath him, the stories they've told us, and just the whole thing when he was a player is massive for a young lad growing up, and seeing him develop the team as he did in the 80s and winning all the trophies was fantastic as a young kid.
When you was 14, 15, 16, making the step up through the academy, did you have the opportunity to speak to him much?
Only on the odd occasion, to be honest. Most of the time I've seen him, obviously, when he left the club, and obviously he lives in Formby, so I got to know him very well in Formby, and obviously the older players, the like of Fergie and Snods, who played underneath him, who are still here, I haven't got a bad word to say about him, to be honest. He was a genuinely nice fella, honestly. He was down to earth and a great character, and obviously the stories what the old players tell me about, and the way he was as a man manager, especially, like, he was gifted. He was unbelievable, and just a genuine all-round nice man.
Has everyone been regaling their stories about him, their memories of him over these last couple of days?
They have, obviously. We've got Fergie, we've got Jimmy Comer, who more or less got interviewed by him when he was here. So there's a few people here, and some of the stories that they come, which, to be honest, I've probably heard of before, because Howard's a legend of the place. So the stories are great for people to look up to and to see how it was in them days, and see what it was like, all a part of team spirit, and the camaraderie of the team was up there. And I think the players who played underneath will second that. They were unbelievable with him.
And how will you remember him then, Tony?
Just as a wonderful person. Obviously, like I said about the stories people tell us, they will live on. They're unbelievable. They're ones what you will never forget. But as a general person who you can speak to, who you're seeing every day more or less around the shops and where I live, he was just a really, really nice person, and a humble man who will give you time, any time.
Spoke really well there, didn't he, Hibbo? Everyone's affected by it. We've spoken about your story with Howard at the end. What about the beginning? What were your first impressions of Howard Kendall?
Positive, of course, but it was a phone call, basically. He managed to catch me in a pub on a Saturday night in Wimbledon Village, where I was growing up, and my mum had given him the pub's number because he'd obviously phoned the house, and I was having a game of Killer, as you do on a Saturday night, and the landlord came down and said to me, "There's Mr. Kendall on the phone." I thought he was winding me up, but he went up and took the phone call, and he said, "Graham," I said, "Mr. Kendall." He said, "How are you?" I said, "I'm very well." He said, "Listen, will you come and speak to me? I'd love you to come and sign for Everton Football Club and speak to me." I said, "Mr. Kendall, just tell me when. I'd love to." And he said, "You having a few beers, lad?" I said, "I'm just having a couple, Mr. Kendall, you know, just unwinding." He said, "Well, have a few for me, lad." And I thought to myself, I'm going to like this man, and certainly true.
What a wonderful start to a wonderful relationship. Well, not many people remember that Howard Kendall was actually the manager who gave Francis Jeffers his first team debut back in December 1997 at Old Trafford against Manchester United at the age of just 16. Needless to say, Franny will always be grateful, so it was a massive shock when he heard of Howard's passing.
Couldn't believe the news. As I say, I'll be forever in debt to him for making my dreams come true at Everton. Such a sad day, listening to Snods on the radio, and you know, I can see the effect he had on most people that came across him, or most people that he managed. He had a massive effect on them.
You were just 16 years old at that time. What do you remember about the build up to that day and that time?
Well, I remember being around the first team squad for a couple of weeks. I think I was on the bench. I can't remember, it's going back so far, but I think I was on the bench a couple of games before that, but never got on. And then we went to Old Trafford, and I remember I was ready to go out. Actually, I was ready to go to a party, a family party, Christmas night, and the phone rang, and it was Howard. Rang my house. My mum and dad lived, and I think Big Dunk took ill, so he told me I'd be needed. Get your stuff, lad. Was the way he used to, get your stuff, lad. Get to Belfield as quick as you can, which obviously I did. Took my jeans off, got my trackie on, and went to Belfield, where we got on the bus and went to Manchester to a hotel.
He was the type of manager who had confidence in young players, never afraid to throw them in when he thought they were ready.
Well, yeah, I think so. I mean, I think I was only 16, so I don't think he genuinely believed I was ready. I just think he had no one else really. But he was great for me. You know, he did. He was like a dad to me really when I first got in and around the squad. And you know, I remember talking to him. I came in to get a shower one day, and he was lying in the bath like he always was at Belfield. And he said, "You're doing well, lad. We need to get your old fella in and have a chat with him about a contract for you." So I said, "Yeah, no problem, boss. I'll have a word with my dad when I go home." So I brought my dad in the next day, straight up to see him, and he had my dad in there for a couple of hours, talking footy, you know, talking about how well I'd done, and yeah, the contract was agreed pretty quick.
Diamond, everybody's got a story about Howard Kendall. It will be some funeral in Liverpool next week.
Oh, incredible scenes there'll be. I'm sure the streets will be lined with people paying their last respects to Howard. You know, it's going to be a difficult one, you know, clearly for Lil and the family. You know, that's a desperately difficult time for them. I'm pretty certain there won't be a dry eye in the house.
And I've been had the pleasure of dealing with all the ex-players connected to the attendance at the funeral. Henry Newton, there's a blast from the past he's been on. Alan Irvine texted me just when we came here. Adrian Heath's flying over from America. Nobody wants to miss Howard Kendall's funeral. No,
I mean, and that speaks volumes, doesn't it? You know, the players held Howard in such high esteem, had such respect for him, and it'll be great to see them all. There'll be a few stories Thursday evening, I'm sure.
You can bet your life on that. Well, we've already heard from David Unsworth, who got his first professional contract from Howard Kendall, and Franny Jeffers, who got his first team debut. Next up, it's the turn of Jimmy Martin to pay his tribute. Jimmy's the kit manager at Finch Farm, and he was appointed to that role by Howard some 25 years ago, and they've remained close friends ever since.
Well, we've always been very close. It was me, Colin, Teddy, Derek. We were always as close to Howard. We all sat down the front of the bus and we all stuck together, and he'd be so sadly missed. Like a second dad really, Howard. Everywhere we went, we was all together, you know what I mean? Really stuck together, looked after us all the time.
We were just speaking off camera then, and you were saying how much he was for team spirit, team morale. That was one of his real values.
Yeah, the thing with Howard was he didn't like losing like none of us did, you know what I mean? And I used to try and keep the morale in the club, you know. I was brought up with Howard and Colin and all that to be lively and have a laugh and a joke and get involved with the lads. And then we got beat. Howard would take us to a Chinese in Southport. We'd all have a good time and a good laugh. And you can guarantee 9 times out of 10 we'd go and play on a Saturday and win.
Can you remember any particular funny moments that you'll always recall now of Howard?
The funny time is when we were at, we used to stay in a hotel in Slough, and we got to the cup final this time, and he brought Freddie Starr down, and Freddie Starr was doing her thing, and we were all hanging out the window looking at like Freddie falling down a hole and things like that. That was what I would like. I would like the banter, like to keep the lads lively, and yeah, he's brilliant at that.
Just go back a couple of years, almost 2 years in fact, when he was Roberto, just after Roberto took over the job. Roberto invited him down here to Finch Farm, and he was amazed with the place, wasn't he?
Yeah, he come down and we had a photograph taken together. it's all still in the kit room. There's me and Howard and Tony Sage, who's my assistant, and the picture in the background is Colin, Alan Ball and Howard, you know, all hanging on the wall, and I was pointing it out to Howard and said, that's going to stay in here till I go, at least. And that's how close we were, you know, because I knew Alan Ball as well, through Howard and Colin, and they were three absolutely great men.
Jimmy and Howard were close friends. You're close friends with both of them. And Howard was the type of manager who liked all his staff to be involved as much as the players.
Yeah, very much so. He saw us all as one, basically. You know, the staff absolutely adored Howard. You know, he expected everybody to do their jobs, whether it be on a Saturday afternoon at 3 o'clock or behind the scenes with people like Jimmy and what have you. But, you know, ultimately we were all treated in the same impeccable way by Howard.
This is a lovely photograph as well, Graham.
Terrific.
Colin Harvey and Howard Kendall. You can see the mutual affection and respect between the two. And Colin was a massive part of it all, wasn't he?
Yeah, there weren't two fantastic players alongside Alan Ball, you know, the holy trinity there. But, you know, when I signed for Everton, Colin was the coach. So, you know, there was no hiding place on a training session because, you know, the gaffer used to join in and Colin was very bullish and, you know, he wanted everything done properly as well. So, you know, the standards were set by those two in particular.
One facet of football that seems to have disappeared is the end-of-season social. I've heard countless stories, plenty that we probably can't tell on BTV, Graham, but you'll have been on many end-of-season tours in the company of Howard Kendall.
Yeah, I have, and they were particularly enjoyable, as you would imagine. I mean, it's totally different now. The game's totally changed, but, you know, we went out and we worked hard during the season and we had a good time at the end of it. But like all good leaders, you've got to be able to lead from the front, and he was up there with the best.
His man management skills on and off the pitch were just about perfect.
Well, they were. You know, at the end of the day, I've always said it, you know, Howard loved his players. It's as simple as that, and he adored spending time with them.
It's a lovely phrase, that, isn't it? Howard loved his players.
He did, but he expected his players to be ready on a Saturday afternoon. It was, you know, you make sure you get the job done Saturday afternoon, and I'll make sure you're looked after during the week.
And the players made sure they were ready, didn't they?
They did. You had to be. You had to be, because you'd run through a brick wall for that man.
Well, that's just about it for part 2 of the Everton show. After the break, it's our big interview slot, and this week it's Joe Royle speaking about his great friend. Welcome back to part 3 of this week's Everton show. It's the big interview part of the programme now, and after last week's poignant piece of film with Howard Kendall and Ian Snowden, this week we speak to Joe Royle, himself of course very much an Everton legend and a great pal and former teammate of Howard Kendall.
He'd arrived as a young star. You know, he was on a lot of clubs' lists at the time, including our neighbours. And he was seen as a great coup. He came in with a smile, and sad to say he's gone out with a smile. Last time I saw him, he was grinning and giggling away as usual. I saw him at home games regularly. He was up in the Dixie Dean in his corner, Howard's corner. We turned his chair around on Saturday and had an empty glass of wine, an empty wine glass in his corner. So it's been very, very sad that the whole place, I've never seen or heard Goodison so quiet for a big game. You know, it wasn't the usual bear pit that we have for these big games. So it's just unbelievable, really. I still can't come to terms with it. Colin was the same. I spoke to John Hurst. He was the same. And just can't believe it.
Just take us back to Howard's playing career. A lot of the elder Evertonians now would have had the opportunity to see him play. Yeah. But for those who didn't, can you tell us a bit about him as a player?
He was a scrupulously fair player. He was a terrific tackler, but never a foul tackler, which sometimes was to his... Well, he suffered with it because people would leave a foot in, and Howard, being honest as he was, would go for the ball. And he got some of his worst injuries by being fair. And timing, Howard was about timing. In the right place at the right time, arriving in the box, a tackle, a lately timed tackle, and then a marvellous all-round modern midfield player. You know, everybody talks about the Trinity, the three of them, Kendall, Ball, Harvey. They all had different talents and different assets. and Howard dovetailed in with the other two immediately, as if they'd played together or been separated at birth. They just gelled, and they were the engine room, the axis for our attacking style, and they defended when they had to. So all round a terrific player. He recognised he had always had a great football brain and recognised situations, weighed in with goals, an exceptional volleyer of the ball. And everybody says the same thing. To say that he never had a full cap is just, well, it's outrageous.
What was he like as a character in the dressing room?
He's giggly. He loved it. He loved the banter in the dressing room. He soon found himself with Alan Ball and Ernie Hunt living together, and they used to come in and they get out the car laughing every day. And the whole thing, the whole team spirit in 69, 68, 67, round that to winning the league was terrific. And Howard was an integral part of that. You know, we never stopped laughing. And Howard, I will remember Howard giggling away. He had his own little giggle.
Did you always believe he was the type of person to go into management after he finished playing?
Not so obviously, I wouldn't say. You know, I think we were all surprised, really. I think out of all of us that you would have said that Brian LeBone or maybe Johnny Morrissey were the more obvious candidates, and yet Colin, Howard, Bawley, myself all went into management. So, but I would have said those two. You know, they seemed to be the more serious thinkers about the game at the time. Although Howard always loved the game, don't get me wrong, but once he did go into the coaching side, whether he was just as a manager or initially as a player coach or player manager, he obviously took things on board very, very quickly. And for all the giggling, he was a very steely man. Once his mind was made up about things, he stuck to it. And he had to be, because his early days here weren't easy. But he never lost faith in what he was doing and the players that he had.
And how did it help you when you came to take over the managerial reins here?
We'd never lost touch. You know, we'd never lost touch. You know, he was always very close. Probably his best friend in football was Brian Greenhouse, and him and Greeny had been inseparable since they were players of Preston together. And he of course came and was chief scout for Howard and chief scout later for myself. But we never lost touch, and we would always talk football. You know, there's no doubt about it. At Stoke, he rang me and asked me about players when I'd been playing with players, a couple of players at Man City, and we just never ever lost touch. You know, without being inseparable, we would always be great friends when we met.
And of course, as you were saying at the beginning of this interview, he was popular on the after dinner circuit, something you enjoy. You know, he was such a character in that way, and he enjoyed regaling his tales.
He enjoyed life, Howard. You know, it's no secret that he did enjoy his life, and but most of all, he loved people. He couldn't. You could never see Howard sat on his own and having a good time. I don't think he ever sought solitude. He always wanted the comfort of people around him, friends he could enjoy a laugh with, and okay, maybe a glass of wine, but equally he was a lovely man. I think you'd be hard pressed to find an enemy in his life or someone that would speak badly about Howard.
Is there any particular anecdote from Howard that will always stick in your mind?
None particular, just his life. His life was a great anecdote, and I just remember him giggling. You know, he just loved a smile. I can't remember him too often looking sad. You know, and he loved Everton, and like so many people, as the great Alan Ball said once, Evans touched you. You know, he said that, and no, he loved Everton. He loved going there. He was an ever-present when he could be, and it sounds daft. Whenever he was available, he used to go to Ireland to see his children. I know, you know, but he saw most of Everton's home games, and he was always supportive. You know, Roberto will tell you that Howard would always be supportive to the manager, whoever it was at Everton. And we're all still coming to terms with Howard not being here somehow or other. We always thought he was unbreakable.
Graham, Big Joe there came out with another fantastic line. Howard just loved people.
He was a people's man. Just loved spending time talking to people. It didn't have to be about football, and it didn't have to be with football folk. Many a time I've bumped into Howard and he's been talking to the local people around Formby where he lived. So, you know, it's not just the football side of things. His general outlook was the fact that everybody loved him.
Whenever you were socialising with Howard for a glass of wine or a couple of beers, you never had Howard to yourself, did you? Because everybody would come over and he would welcome them.
Yeah, he was infectious. You know, anybody who was prepared to sit down and get involved and talk and have a glass of wine or whatever you like, you were more than welcome to his table. And he treated you all the same, with the same respect. And that was the beauty of him. He just knew how to handle people.
He would handle the strains of the Premier League now really well, because the media guys in the 80s and also the 90s in his other spells at Everton loved him because he had a terrific way with them.
Yeah, he just charmed everybody, didn't he? He had that cheeky grin about him. Joe mentioned his infectious giggle, which I'll never ever forget as well. But he could wind them round his little finger. It was as simple as that. He was a very, very clever bloke. But you know, at the end of the day, you know, none of that happens unless you're very, very good at your job. And he was very good at his job, both as a player and as a manager.
His third spell at Everton, and he used to say the same thing, didn't go as well as anybody wanted it to, but he still didn't hide. He faced up to the media, and they really respected him for that.
Well, they did, yeah. I mean, I think when you set the standards he did on his first period at Everton Football Club, how are you ever going to live up to that? And it's a big call because a lot of people turn around to you and say, don't go back. You know, don't go back and potentially tarnish the memories. But Howard certainly didn't tarnish the memories, because as we saw on Saturday with the reception that the crowd gave him and everybody, and the pure devastation, you know, they remember those memories with so much fondness.
Yet another fantastic picture. Yeah. Howard there in his cotton royal blue shirt.
Yeah, and he hasn't changed, really.
No.
Didn't change at all, did he?
Got a bit thinner on top, maybe.
Yeah, oh yeah, of course, yeah. But he'd have loved you saying that about him as well, Daz. But no, I mean, as we mentioned, I mean, it doesn't matter red or blue. You know, we've heard tributes from Kenny Dalglish. Phil Thompson spoke supremely about him on Soccer Saturday for a long period of time as well, which I thought was a great tribute to the man, as did Jamie Carragher.
I'm glad you mentioned Liverpool Football Club, because Howard's passing has transcended the rivalry in this city, much the way that Bill Shankly's did. And Phil Thompson, there's no bigger fan of Bill Shankly than Phil Thompson. He likened Howard to Bill Shankly.
Yeah. You know, and as I said earlier, I mean, one of the greats alongside, you know, the Shanklys and the Cloughs and the Sir Alexes of this world. So it says it all when you get people of that magnitude talking about him in such good esteem.
What was it like as a player in training? Because I get the impression that Howard was the type of manager who would love to be involved in the training.
He did. Well, he didn't get involved in the warm-up because he looked out of his window at the training ground, which overlooked the pitches, to make sure we were all doing the warm-ups properly, and then he came shuffling out ready when the five-a-side came about. But the memory I always have is he always used to put a dustbin liner under his sweat top. So he used to be running around, and if he was on the opposition side, you always knew when he was coming because you could hear him before you saw him, with his little rustling of his bin bag. But he was a great player, a really good player. Even in those days, you had Colin on one side, Howard on the other side. You know, it was a toss-up whose side you wanted to be on. What was better, to have Colin growling at you or Howard and his guile and his vision and his capability? It was some good moments.
Joe Roll said he had a lovely first touch, Howard Kendall.
He did, yeah, he did. You could tell. I mean, even now, you lose your legs, but you never lose your touch, and you never lose your brain either. You know, he knew what he wanted to do. Sometimes the legs didn't allow it, and he wasn't happy about that. But no, terrific player.
Like all managers, he must have been able to have a row as well.
Oh, he could, yeah. I mean, there's times when, you know, you've had a little bit of a pop at him and you've had a dig at him, but he came back at you, but he was sharp, so sharp he could cut you down. I mean, it was a great time when Slaven Bilic was, I think we were drawing 1-1 and Slav was playing centre half, but he decided with 10 minutes to go that he thought he could change the course of the game if he went up front. So he did, he went up front, he set the winner up. So he comes in after the game and says, see, I've changed the game, I win us the game. Howard turned around to him, he said, yeah, you're right, lad. He said, if you'd stayed at the back, we'd have lost.
Well, Howard Kendall's message this week, and Graham knows as well as anyone, would be there's a game to play on Saturday. Go and beat Arsenal. After the break, we will be looking ahead to our weekend visit to the Emirates. Welcome back to the fourth and final part of this week's Everton show. We're bringing things right back onto the pitch now, starting with the under-21s in action against Schalke 04 of Germany earlier this week. Coach David Unsworth was able to call on the services of Tom Cleverley, Stephen Pienaar and Brian Oviedo for the game, but the Germans managed to nick it 1-0.
To see Tom back to play an hour, Stephen to play 45, Brian Oviedo, whose performance I thought was outstanding, really terrific for those three boys, and Joel in goal, got vital minutes under his belt as well. I thought the senior boys led by example tonight, and they were a credit. There was nothing in the game. It was a lucky goal for Schalke, a deflection, but our cutting edge in the final third just wasn't there tonight, and we could still be playing now, and I probably don't think we'd score. There's a real lack of quality in the final third, which is disappointing, because we know we have got quality, in wide areas and up front, and unfortunately we didn't show it tonight, and we probably didn't deserve to lose the game, but they get the lucky goal and defend for the majority of the game and try and hit us on the counter attack, and we huffed and puffed for the majority of that game. The penalty miss seemed to affect us. I don't know why, but it did, and we just never really had, the real glorious opportunity to get ourselves back. I felt that if we did get that goal back, we'd have gone on and won the game comfortably, but it just wasn't to be. And like you said, their goalkeeper made 3 or 4 really good saves.
That's a terrific experience for David Unsworth's under-21s to play in the Premier League Under-21 International Cup against continental sides.
Yes, important part of the lads' development, because we experienced Europe last year, didn't we? And if we get back in there as soon as possible as well, some of these young boys may well benefit from playing the likes of Schalke.
And how many times on this very show have you and I said that the young players would benefit from having the likes of Tom Cleverley, Stephen Pienaar, Brian Oviedo, Joe Robles in the side?
Yeah, something I remember when I was growing up as a kid. If you had a few of the senior boys alongside you, not only did they make your life a little bit easier with their quality, but you learnt so much from those players, making sure that you're doing the right things, you're in the right kind of areas. So the 3 lads that are out there helping the young boys certainly would have done their part.
We saw the highlights there. It can only help a young player, surely, to be experiencing Goodison Park under floodlights against the European team.
Again, another vital aspect, Darren. That can you deal with the pressure in some respects of playing at Goodison Park under the lights as well? It's a whole different perspective at times. Stick 40,000 on it as well, and that again is a totally different scenario. So, all preparing the lads for those future moments.
Roberto's going to have some selection headaches, isn't he, when all these guys are back to full Premier League fitness?
He will, but I'm sure that's what he wants. He's been talking about it for a couple of years now, the fact that we need to have a strong squad. So, selection problems is something I'm sure Roberto's more than happy to deal with.
Brendan Galloway was our official player of the month earlier this week. When Leighton Baines is fit, has Roberto got a decision to make, or does Bainesy come back in because he's one of the best in Europe?
He's certainly got a difficult decision to make. I think the beauty of it for Roberto is not a decision he has to rush into. Sometimes when you're England's left back, he's been out of injured for such a period of time, the temptation is to rush him back. Such has been Brendan's form. Roberto doesn't have that problem.
Well, as David Unsworth was saying just earlier, Tom Cleverley was part of that Everton side that lost out narrowly to Schalke. And after the game, Cleverley spoke about his return to fitness and the challenge that awaits the first team in North London this weekend.
Spoke to Unzi before the game, and that was the plan, 45 to an hour, so I'm pleased to come through it.
Where does the progress go from now then? Have you got half a mind on Saturday's game?
Yeah, well, I'll see what the manager thinks, see how he thought I did tonight, and then hopefully I'll wake up in the morning, everything's fine, and yeah, I'm available for Saturday, so if you want to use me.
And how pleased are you with the way your rehabilitation's gone? Obviously it was difficult happening so early on in your time here.
Yeah, that was a frustrating thing. I felt like I was settling in well and hit the ground running, but I think I was quite lucky initially. I thought it was much worse at the time, and so to be back playing in 7 weeks, back on the field, I'm delighted with. I feel lucky, and hopefully I can take that final step in my rehab and get a game for the first team soon.
You'd really managed to string some form together just before the injury. Do you think you'll be able to get back to that nice and quickly now you are back?
Definitely, I'm a naturally fit lad, so it shouldn't take me long to get my legs back, and as long as my ankle's 100%, and I feel like I can get back to form and hopefully help lads.
whether you make Saturday or not. Obviously, it's a big match coming off the back of the disappointment against Manchester United. Are you confident the lads can bounce back and get a result down at the Emirates?
Definitely. We lost to Man City and then reacted to that result very well, with some really positive results. So there's no reason why we can't do the same. Like you said, it's a tough game. They're in good form, and after that, there are some more easy games. So it'd be nice to really get a good result and then hopefully string some wins together.
And your away form's been good as well so far.
Yeah, definitely. We've not lost away from home yet, and I think we've only conceded 2 goals. So hopefully that can continue.
I'm delighted to see this guy back in action, Graham, because he really hit the ground running when he signed for the football club.
He did. Very impressive performances. Was like basically siding on out to the left a little bit as well, which has been a little bit of a problem for us because we are a little bit lopsided without having that natural left-sided player. So, you know, Tom was there and he was dealing with that situation very well. And unfortunately, that's where the area of the pitch he got injured at Tottenham, didn't he?
You and I were there, weren't we? He gives the team an energy, doesn't he? A vibrancy.
Plenty of energy, good awareness about him, good technique on the ball as well. Very busy player, good work rate as well. So, and vastly experienced.
What have you made of Arsenal so far this season, Graham?
In Europe, up until the other night, pretty average. But certainly in the Barclays Premier League, as I've said all from minute one, I think they're going to be there and thereabouts. I think they're a real, force to be reckoned with. They're going to get better. Sanchez has come back as well, and clearly their form gets better. But then Walcott started to score goals as well. So I think we're going to have to be playing. We're going to have 8 or 9 lads are going to have to be at the top of their game to get a result.
It was a great win for Arsenal against Bayern Munich, wasn't it?
It was a terrific result for them. I didn't particularly expect Arsenal to beat Bayern Munich, such as the force the Germans have been and the form that they've been in as well. But, that's what we've said. Arsenal on any given day are a force to be reckoned with. So we're going to have to go down there Saturday evening and really give a good account of ourselves.
21 games since we had a win away at Arsenal, some at Highbury, some at the Emirates. The last one was 1996 when Andrei Kanchelskis and...
what's his name?
Graham Stewart scored the goals. What do you recall of that?
A good game, actually. A really good game. I used to love playing at Highbury. It was a terrific ground to play at. And I remember going round David Seaman and slotting it in the bottom corner with my left foot, which was a rarity in itself. But Andre, again, he had the capability of being a match winner for us, and he was on that afternoon.
It is a difficult place to go, the Emirates, isn't it? No two ways about it.
Oh yeah, they always had good sides. Whether the days of George Graham, when they were particularly well organised, they could grind results out, to the days of Arsene Wenger, where they're so fluent and their movement's good, and if you catch them on a good day, there's not too much you can do about it.
Well, we'll be there again at the weekend, and as an ex-Chelsea player, Graham Stewart, I'm sure, guaranteed a warm welcome from the Arsenal supporters that we bump into. Well, a win over Arsenal in the capital city is certainly long overdue, and Roberto Martinez is looking forward to the game at the weekend, particularly now he's armed with extra knowledge of our opponents following our meeting in Singapore during the summer.
Well, I'm sure that we probably closer to understanding how well Arsenal been playing since January, because obviously we faced them in pre-season in the Singapore trophy, in the Asia trophy, and we know that in that day we saw the real technical ability and the quality that they have as a team. They had their setbacks at the beginning of the season. I think they reacted to that really well, and probably now they're finding themselves enjoying their football extremely well. They had their problems in Europe as well, as you can imagine. But I just feel that we're going to be facing one of the best teams in the competition, if not the informed team in the competition. So we'll have to be aware, but it's a moment to look at ourselves. We were really disappointed with the result of the weekend. It's a result that we couldn't see coming with the start that we have this campaign. And as it happens in football, what you have to do as a team is react, and clearly we'll have to do that at the weekend.
Graham, when Arsenal are doing well and winning football matches, Arsene Wenger is the bee's knees. When Arsenal lose football matches, it's time for him to go. Where do you stand on Arsene Wenger?
I think he went for a long period of time, didn't he, without winning a trophy. That was his biggest problem. And I think a lot of pundits and Arsenal fans particularly could see vulnerable areas on the park that he hadn't addressed. And I think that's where the criticism came.
One of which perhaps was between the sticks, but what a signing Petr Cech could prove to be. He could be the difference.
He could be, and you talk about paying £50 million for strikers and them scoring you 30 goals and shooting you to titles and cups. you know, equally a goalkeeper, a top goalkeeper, can go in the sticks and save you 12, 15 points a season. I think Petr Cech is certainly somebody who's got that capability. He's shown that in the past.
Very quickly, can we go there and win?
Of course we can go there and win. You know, we've got to be, we've got to bounce back. We've got to be positive. Our away form has been good so far this season, and let's go down there and give a real good account of ourselves.
Graham, thank you very much for your input on this week's show. I know it's been very, very difficult for everybody connected with Everton Football Club. That's it for another Everton show. As I say, it's been an incredibly testing week for all Evertonians, but pulling together is what we do best, and the response from everyone has been immense, and I can assure you it's been a source of great comfort to the family of Howard Kendall. We've lost a legend, a gentleman, an Evertonian and a friend. A very good night.